Throughout its history, Weekly Shonen Jump has only followed a single trajectory: up. Years of aggressive serialization and paying attention to what its readers want through surveys helped spawn countless world-famous manga that helped catapult Jump into being the manga magazine. Over the last year's worth of history videos I've made, we've been running through the magazine's golden age, a time of rapid and explosive growth thanks to hits like Dragon Ball, Fist of the North Star, City Hunter, and later Yu Yu Hakusho and Slam Dunk, plus many, many more. This would all come to a head though in 1995, with Jump reaching its peak in terms of circulation with this issue here, issue 3-4 of 1995, which I own a replica of, and it has this really nice cover where every manga is represented with these little felt dolls. This is the most printed issue of Jump there will ever be, as since then the circulation number of Jump has only decreased with time, as have most magazines. I won't dig too deeply into the idea of physical media falling out of favor though, as the focus of my videos here is on Jump specifically, and there are other reasons why we see a decline in circulation, readership, and sales post this issue. Chiefly among them are big series ending, Jump's moneymakers. Yu Yu Hakusho ended last year in 1994, and a decent chunk of Jump's bigger manga would come to an end this year, like Ninku, Bonbonzaka, and Ta-chan, and in the following years Jump would begin losing its other big series too, like Slam Dunk. But the most important manga to end would be this year with Dragon Ball. So now that the stage is set, let's explore Shonen Jump in the year 1995 and the beginning of Shonen Jump's Dark Age. To kick things off, let's talk Dragon Ball. It's been a series that's consistently been in these videos and the magazine for a long time, and covering it piecemeal and getting to reread it within the context of the ever-growing magazine has been a legitimate joy. It's also always been a bit emotional to cover, since while I was preparing for the first video Dragon Ball would show up in the 1984 history video, Akira Toriyama sadly passed away. I hope that through these videos I've helped show how powerful Toriyama's legacy was, from Dr. Slump to Dragon Ball, and in the future too, when we cover his smaller stories. Fittingly, for the end of the manga and for its last appearance within the Jump History series, I think Dragon Ball ends with a bang, the Buu Saga. I neglected to cover it in the last video since I want to gush about Dragon Ball one last time for its finale. The Buu Saga is my favourite part of the series, and I think it melds the later action elements of Dragon Ball with the earlier comedic ones really well. To begin, we have the final parts of the 25th Tenkaichi Budokai that culminate in Mr. Satan winning after bribing Android 18. Their interactions together is priceless, and now that it's over, some characters are freed up to engage in the wider plot surrounding Buu, like Trunks and Goten. The beginning of the saga where Goku and Co infiltrate Bobbitty's spaceship is a ton of fun too. I love the diagram we're presented with and how they have to gradually descend, fighting different lackeys. But by far the best part is when Bobbitty influences Vegeta's mind due to the residual evil within him. This gives us a great stage to have more Goku vs Vegeta, which if you enjoy Dragon Ball is always a highlight. We also get a bunch of other great fights and interactions too, like Gohan fighting Dabura as well. Everything gets thrown into chaos though when Buu is finally summoned, who has the personality of a petulant child who only wants to play and doesn't like listening. Buu being able to turn anyone into treats he can eat is busted as heck as an ability, and he does this to Dabura almost immediately, showing off how much of a threat he is. I personally think Buu is Dragon Ball's greatest antagonist. He not only exhibits the aspects of terror and power we associate with figures like Frieza and Cell, but has this comedic element that backs him up too. Contrast or juxtaposition is a favorite artistic and literary device of mine, and ding ding ding, Buu exhibits this in spades. He is the greatest, most world-ending threat the series has ever seen up to this point, taking multiple characters to face him down, and yet he is so silly and childish. Dragon Ball doesn't have all that much depth most of the time. It doesn't really need it either, but I do find Buu interesting because he possesses more than most antagonists. His character feels like it's approaching the idea of power and how it can be abused or misused in the hands of someone who isn't responsible enough to wield it. In this case, it's a child with that power who cannot use it responsibly. To further add to this theme, Boo's other half is someone who is wielding power only through hate and malice. It takes characters like Mr. Satan to actually sit with Boo and teach him the ways of the world for him to become good and learn how to use his powers responsibly. I really love this aspect of the Boo saga and how it shifts focus away from our usual suspects to focus on these two goofballs and their growing relationship. It feels very classic Dragon Ball and mirrors Goku and Bulma's meeting, and I think this is very intentional on Toriyama's part. That cyclical aspect of returning to similar ideas from the beginning is something I love to see in stories too, since it makes them feel that much more whole. Before we fully wrap up, let's run through some other cool things about this arc. We get Super Saiyan 3, which looks cool as heck. We get fusion aspects introduced, which is very neat. Shout out to my boy Fat Gotenks. We also get some cool redesigns for all the characters years later as well. Some of my favorite parts are the fact that it takes a lot of different characters to beat Boo, including Goku, Gohan, and Goten, Goku and his sons as a family, and even Vegeta, who has a surprisingly heartfelt moment when he thinks of the children and wants them to be saved at the expense of his own life. It's wild how serious a bunch of characters are in this arc, and then you just have Boo being goofy seconds later. All of the fusion aspects are really cool too. It's cool to see the different Vegeta and Goku characters kind of combine. Not only do you get Goku and Vegeta combining together, but you also get their sons combining together. So it's very cool to see everyone has just literally come together to fight this world-ending threat. Ending it all with the Genki Dama or Spirit Bomb and the people of the world giving Goku power is very sweet too. It's very Shonen Jump. The people of the world, friendship, that's what you need to beat the final big bad, and it's a really lovely sentiment. I think all of this builds to Dragon Ball having a very sweet conclusion that puts forward the idea that kindness is very important, that reaching out to others from Bulma to Goku to Mr. Satan to Boo, and by the end from Goku to Oob, is made out to be very important. I don't think it's a very overt theme, since Toriyama seems to abhor putting much thought into things like that from the interviews I've read with him, but without a doubt he has illustrated a story about the importance of establishing bonds. I think what Dragon Ball says ultimately is, while striving to be strong is a worthy pursuit, it means nothing if you don't do so with others in mind who will back you up. Having plenty of friends and being kind is just as important in being the strongest as punching the hardest is. Goku proves this, and coming full circle he shows kindness in wishing Boo back into Oob. It's a very fitting ending for the series that never fails to make me smile. After a whole decade within Shonen Jump and a whole year's worth of videos from me, Dragon Ball has finally come to a close. Rereading and covering it arc by arc like this has only strengthened its importance and greatness to me. It's such a fun series that has remained fresh and popular even as Jump changed over the last decade. So many big manga began and have ended during its run, but nothing touched its popularity and the legacy it left behind, and that's because it's truly one of a kind. Dragon Ball ending finally marks the end of the Golden Age. While Slam Dunk would run for a while longer and other hits were still in the magazine, the ending of such a monumental series did hit the magazine, and I often hear people say that the Golden Age of Jump is Dragon Ball. Its run fits the time frame pretty perfectly, and as it winded down, we saw a drop in circulation for the magazine. Finding something to fill its shoes would be hard, and though eventually we would get something suitably silly and full of adventure, for now we would enter a lull and other manga would have to do some heavy lifting. So let's see what the magazine's answer was to Dragon Ball ending. Our first new manga of the year would be Hisoka Returns, lasting 58 chapters and 7 volumes by Ken Yagami, and what puzzles me is why Hisoka is returning when he wouldn't be in the magazine for a few more years. Oh whoops, that's the wrong Hisoka. Hisoka Returns follows this guy, Hashijima Hisoka, a teacher who is in love with his fellow teacher and prior student, Rito. One day he ends up proposing to her with an ammonite as she loves fossils, but in a wild turn of events, a child is drowning at the same time in a nearby river, so Hisoka jumps right in without a thought to save them, and Hisoka ends up dying. Hisoka Returns then sees Hisoka return, but in the body of the child he saved, Narukami Goro, due to a passing monk's Tibetan magic.
I am first going to tell you a little bit about the country called Tibet.
While the setup is a little wild and relies on a lot of conveniences, initially the series explores a very fun dynamic as nobody can find out that Narukami is actually Hisoka or he'll die. He also wants to get closer to Rito, his prior love interest, but she only sees him as a student now and also the cause of her beloved's death. There's a lot of drama, and for a Jump series it feels very different. I can't quite point to much that has the same vibe or art style. Jump just doesn't have much drama series in general, so this stuck out to the people at the time, giving it a bit of a following. It also plays it surprisingly well for it being an older work that's tackling an adult in a child's body. Hisoka quickly attempts to quell a female student who falls in love with him, and it's made a point that the main romance isn't something perfectly acceptable. There's a lot of aspects to it that are quite novel too, like Hisoka being his own rival in love. The biggest obstacle to him is his dead self, which makes for an interesting dynamic with Rito. It also opts to actually explore the character of Narukami Goro, who Hisoka is inhabiting, and the aftermath of taking over his body and changing his life. Sadly, Hisoka Returns was subject to a lot of editorial meddling though, which Ken Yagami mentions in the afterword of Volume 1. This is always a subject that's mentioned in Shonen Jump circles, but often it lacks the evidence to back anything up, and it's how aggressive editors can be in their mandated changes. It's a swampy subject that I'd like to tackle at some point because I think Shonen Jump and its editors could lead to a fascinating discussion on authorship and the creative versus capitalistic weight art takes on. But in this case, I think we have an interesting example of a work that was pushed to change, which eventually ended with it losing its identity somewhat and floundering. There are some similarities to Yu Yu Hakusho here, especially initially with the out-of-body experiences, the mix of romance, supernatural, and drama elements. It seems the editors really wanted to latch onto this, and like Yu Yu Hakusho, wanted to push for battle elements to be established later on, which Hisoka Returns would go on to touch on, becoming a little bit more of a supernatural detective manga by its end. This change feels very wonky though, and I think it alienated readers who are fans of the low-stakes sci-fi drama, leading it to become cancelled. In Shonen Jump's insistence to find a new hit that could be the next big battle shonen, they may have forced something unique and well-loved to be something it wasn't, becoming their own worst enemies at a time when they really wanted new hit manga. If you'd like to read this one, and I'd recommend it since it's a different manga for Weekly Shonen Jump, a full official translation did exist as part of the now defunct Manga Reborn platform. I'm not sure it's available anywhere officially anymore, but this translation does exist somewhere on the internet if you want to do some digging. Jinai Ryu Jutsu Butsuden Majima-Kun Suttobasu would last 140 chapters and 15 volumes by Makoto Niwano. Hey, no, that's the wrong Majima. Previously, Niwano's Bomber Girl bombed last year within Jump, only lasting one volume, but this time he would get a hit working on a martial arts battle series. It would follow the titular Majima, a practitioner of jiu-jitsu who is on a quest to become the world's strongest man in the footsteps of his father. He goes on to attend high school while garnering rivals who would wield various martial arts, with the series eventually taking on MMA. As per usual, for a Niwano series, it would have plenty of comedy and a sleaze factor with some more risque jokes. His big-eyed energetic art style is on full display here too, which is something I find very appealing. Sadly, it's only had 2 chapters translated into English, despite its length and level of success. It would end with Majima and his friends/rivals going on to challenge the underworld, which would be explored in the manga's sequel, Jinai Ryujitsu Ruroden Majima Bazeru, which lasted for 142 chapters and 21 volumes, running from 2009 to 2021, shifting its demographic and magazine to seinen so it could explore more adult topics. It would also receive 2 drama CDs in 1998, as well as a mobile game called Strongest X Fierce Battle Majima-Kun Will Be Defeated in the 2010s that seems to be long gone by now. While it's not well known to most Jump fans, it acted as a solid hit for Jump's dark age, and if there's a silver lining to this period, it's that plenty of authors got a chance to stand out or get longer serializations like Niwano. Genki Yade or I'm Fine would be something different for Jump, being written by Ryuji Sugihara, an old veteran of the magazine, with art by Junji Yamamoto, with it being based on accounts of real-world bullying from Mamoru Tsuchiya's daughter. It would be a short-term serial lasting 10 chapters in one volume and would cover the subject of bullying within schools, as it was becoming a heightened issue at the time due to multiple suicides in various schools across Japan. To accompany this, Shonen Jump would also run an extra column alongside this manga, which even ran for multiple months after it ended, called J's Corner, that would further discuss bullying in a serious way. The core plot would follow a girl called Sachiko who gets bullied after a seat change. It has a focus on how bullying is a systematic issue and spreads beyond the individuals involved, with no classmates or teachers helping Sachiko. I have heard some criticisms that it had approached it a little half-heartedly in the end, with it wrapping up a bit too quickly, without fully criticizing the teachers involved, for instance, though for the most part people do describe it as something true to life and something important for the time it was serialized. Takekei Ryusei by Tetsuo Hara would last 26 chapters and 3 volumes, being his final manga in Jump after over a decade of filling the manga with his gorgeous artwork and manly men. And he would go out with a bang by trying to remake or retry Shonen Jump's initial big hit, Otoko Ipiki Gaki Daisho, with a modern coat of paint. This isn't the first time this has even been attempted, with Otokozaka by Masumi Kurumada debuting in the magazine in 1984, with it getting cancelled, which would be the same fate that would befall Takekei Ryusei. It's a work that follows its inspirations closely. A gang leader, in this case a Busosuku motorcycle gang leader, manages to gather significant forces, and over time his influence grows as he comes into contact with all sorts of people. Ryusei starts out by fighting Yakuza before being introduced to Joga Tsurugi, a man amongst men with the dream to establish some sort of republic within Hong Kong made by Japanese people for those who don't fit into the stifling mainland. There's a focus on uniting outsiders and building something greater than yourself, something Otoko Ipiki ended up doing too, though at a much slower pace. I find it really interesting that an attempt to homage this classic Jump work was made, but as I mentioned with Otokozaka, it was attempted before and failed. It's been decades at this point since the original was serialized, and manga has changed considerably. The types of characters and stories that were once told had fallen out of fashion, and no amount of explosions, martial arts, or Ryusei saving a baby whale, as cool and weird as that is, was ever going to save this one, I think. It's weirdly fitting that Tetsuo Hara, one of the last Golden Age veterans from the 80s, would end his run with something incredibly archaic and historically intertwined with Jump, since it succinctly covers that Jump itself has changed a lot since its founding. While this isn't the best manga ever, especially by Tetsuo Hara standards, it might be worth checking out if you're a fan of Jump history. It's a weird piece that pays homage to the past and is emblematic of the change Jump had undergone and would continue to undergo. Even at a time when Jump needed new hits, as sales and circulation began to dip, Takekei Ryusei demonstrated that going back wasn't really an option. If Jump wanted to get out of this dark age, it would have to move forward. In the last video, I remarked that there was a lot of police or detective manga, but I neglected to bring up the state of Shonen Jump's rivals at the time. I try to keep things contained to just the magazine so I don't go too crazy, but in this instance, I have to bring up Detective Conan, or Case Closed, which exploded into the scene last year in Weekly Shonen Sunday. Couple this with Shonen Magazine having the Kindaichi Case Files, which was still leading a prosperous run, Jump was the only magazine out of these 3 big shonen magazines without its finger in the detective mystery pie. This makes the prior police focus of last year make bit more sense, since the manga world and Japan in general were likely going through a big detective phase. Culturally, it's not something I'm super aware of, though I know that these 2 manga existed at the time, plus things like Twin Peaks and Columbo were ever popular, as was detective stuff in general, so I can make an educated guess as to why Jump might be trying to shift to this genre at this time. A mystery detective manga could be something new for them that might help stabilize the magazine's declining state. So what was 1995's answer to all of this when many detective or police series had failed before? Puppets. Puppet Master Sakon, or Karakurizoshi Ayatsuri Sakon, will last 32 chapters in 4 volumes by Masaru Miyazaki and Takeshi Obata. A face we haven't seen in a while, but would pop up a lot more in the coming years. The plot sees Sakon Tachibana, the grandson of a great bunraku master, a form of theatrical puppetry, travel around Japan solving various murders. He is always accompanied by his puppet Ukon, who originates all the way back to the beginning of the Meiji era and is over 100 years old. Generally, Sakon is a very shy and kind-hearted individual, but when involved in a case, he begins to snap and gets more serious, which reminds me of a certain boy in Pharaoh, which we'll touch on in the next episode of this series. In this case, it's a more psychological experience though, as from what I can tell, it's all Sakon. He's just fragmenting his mind and personality so he can take on murder cases. And should this work have lasted longer, I would have loved to see that explored more. I also want to comment on Ayatsuri Sakon's unique tone and vibe within Jump. It's eerie. This is due to it being a murder mystery, but Obata's art really helps sell the tension and horror aspects of the series. In the initial first case or chapter, some of the artwork, notably the bodies, is really intense and even reminds me of Suehiro Maruo's work, someone far removed from the realm of Weekly Shonen Jump. Corpses and killers feel like a tangible threat here, and not just some battle shonen enemy or crook. There's a dark humanity to them, and for the mystery genre, this is something I particularly like. Things aren't as jovial or positive as some of the other mystery manga I've read, like Detective Conan. There's a dreariness to Ayatsuri Sakon, though with the inclusion of the main character and the puppetry elements, a certain beauty can be extracted from it too. Jump seldom has proper horror series, and detective mystery hits are borderline non-existent, so this feels quite unique as part of its roster. It's dark and suitable for this lull in the magazine's history. Throughout its run, it managed to tackle about 7 cases, I think, if we include the original one-shot that debuted in one of Jump's seasonal magazines, with just 4 of these being translated into English, 19 of the 32 or 33 chapters. Thankfully, there is an alternative way to view Sakon, as while it was seemingly cancelled, it did eventually receive an anime adaptation in 1999, which you can find with English subtitles. It possesses a total of 26 episodes that changes some elements, but post its 18th episode it features completely original content, so it's an expansion to the manga. Why this was even released, as this is a cancelled work, is likely due to the popularity of Takeshi Obata as an artist at the time. Hikaru no Go would be publishing by then, which was very popular, so that would be my best guess as to why. TMS, the production company behind it, were also reaping in the success of doing the Detective Conan anime, so things have kind of come full circle here too. I would recommend checking out both versions of Sakon. While the manga isn't complete, due to its structure, nothing is left incomplete on a case basis, so it ends in a satisfying enough way, plus it has some brilliant artwork. The anime is also a very interesting case. I think the atmosphere it builds, the way its voice cast speak, the music, and the way it overall looks is in this distinct period of the late 90s to early 2000s, which I especially adore. There's a beauty and melancholy to it which I associate with the time. It also fits Ayatsuri Sakon's eerie puppet-filled murder mystery concept very well. Ryudo no Shigu by Takeshi Noguchi would last 13 chapters in 2 volumes, following Sig, a ninja who enters the fictional Tsukushima territory, where the main villain named Hyakimaru has caused it to become a lawless land of ninja. It looks like a fairly run-of-the-mill battle shonen, with different factions of ninja and with a focus on martial arts, with some drawing comparisons to Fist of the North Star, as Sig uses a technique called the Invincible Fist of Assassination to remove bones from his enemies, leading them to become unable to fight back. This concept, as well as some of the artwork, definitely has me intrigued, as Noguchi has this style that I feel blends more modern trappings at the time with older design sensibilities. The eyes of his characters also really stand out to me too. Sadly, Ryudo no Shigu was not meant to be and was quickly cancelled. For something a bit different next, 1995 saw more than a few one-shots take center stage on covers. 2 of these were from Tsukasa Hojo. Shonentachi no Itanatsu, Melody of Jenny, and Soku no Hate Shonentachi no Senjo. Both are related to World War II, due to it being the 50th anniversary at the time, with Shonentachi being about a pilot assigned to a kamikaze division, and Melody of Jenny being about a group of children who escape a war camp, trying to return to Tokyo, who get help from a foreign flutist. Finally, there's also American Dream, set in 1935, that wasn't on the cover of Jump, that sees a Japanese baseball player befriend an American player, but due to strained foreign relations, things don't really work out. While I haven't read these works, there's certainly a melancholy about them due to their subject, but also because these would be the last things Tsukasa Hojo would work on within Jump. Perhaps he wanted to do more mature stories, and Jump were weighing on whether they would do well, so they attempted to try something different here, though Hojo would move on and never return. We would also get Shaquille O'Neal Monogatari by Akihiko Nishio and Kenji Mitsuyoshi, obviously a one-shot or two-shot actually, about the basketballer, which is shown off in this cool double feature cover alongside Slam Dunk. Within the next year, the two would also go on to publish a similar two-shot on Reggie Miller in 1996 as well. Basketball wasn't the only sport Jump wanted to latch onto though, as in 1995 we would also see footballer Roberto Baggio also get a one-shot with Forza Roberto Baggio Monogatari, which would make sense as apparently he would appear in the anime of Captain Tsubasa, and overall was popular within the country, endorsing a bunch of Japanese football games. Finally, another one-shot that managed to get a cover was Ballet Numon Ore ga Ballet or Hajimeta Wak by Ta-chan creator Masaya Tokuhiro, who we'll discuss a new series by later on in this video. It's interesting to see one-shots get such a focus this year. A good chunk are based on current events or popular things at the time, so perhaps Jump thought that trying new things outside of manga, externally, might be a good way to increase their reach or popularity.
Hello, it's me, Mario.
Shadow Lady by Masakazu Katsura would last 23 chapters in 3 volumes and would see regular gal Aimi don her magic eyeshadow, which transforms her into the infamous master thief Shadow Lady. Shadow Lady is a very fun manga, mixing a classic episodic thief type narrative, think Cat's Eye or Lupin, with Katsura's penchant for drawing pretty girls. It has plenty of fun action, tantalizing ecchi scenes, multiple outfit swaps for its main character, and even a pretty cute romance line with the main character Aimi is her own biggest rival as she tries to win over this detective who's in love with Shadow Lady. I really feel that Katsura embraced the fun and zany aspects of his stories here, getting rid of most of the drama in his prior works like Video Girl I or DNA Squared, and it works really well. This is going to be an oxymoron, but it's good quality pulp. It's skeezy, there's not a ton of depth, but the concept of a shy girl donning makeup to become a badass thief who messes around with the police is a lot of fun, and it looks amazing. Almost every time I brought up a manga by Katsura, I praised his artwork. It's always very clean, packed with detail, and is expressive. His character designs are especially appealing in this work too. Aimi is positively adorable in the way she's depicted. I love her little sidekick Demo as well. And all the Shadow Lady varieties, which are spawned from different colors of eyeshadow, are very well drawn. Later on, the story does shift a bit and introduces some demons that Shadow Lady needs to face down, and damn, we got fan service on multiple ends of the spectrum, which I really love to see. Sadly, it seems Jump's readership weren't on board at the time, which is a massive shame as I'd gladly read a few hundred chapters of this. Perhaps others overseas think this too, as this is an extremely odd case where Shadow Lady not only has an English release, but one in the form of single-issue American comics, published by Dark Horse. This splits the series up into a few arcs, but contains the entirety of the Shonen Jump run, plus a one-shot. It is flipped though, which takes a while to get used to. Still, I'm glad you can actually read it and potentially own this work in English, as I had such a fun time with it. Also to note, Shadow Lady originated in 1992, where Katsura had a short serial in V-Jump in full color that seemed to really hone in on the American comic influence. So potentially this was some kind of catalyst to getting that Dark Horse English release. Perhaps because of all of this, it's also got a decent sized cult following too. I've run into plenty of people who are aware of Shadow Lady or have expressed their love of it, and there's even this amazingly cool looking figure of Shadow Lady in demo, which I would totally be tempted to buy if I had any disposable income of any kind. Ooh, what's this? A not so subtle reminder that I have a Patreon, and if you'd like to support these videos, you can by throwing money at me. I probably won't buy this Shadow Lady figurine, by the way, because it's way too expensive, but I'll be able to actually eat and live and keep making these videos, so thank you for your support. Mortal Commando Guy would last 12 chapters in 2 volumes by Shinichi Sakamoto, the author of works such as Innocent, The Climber, and DRCL Midnight Children. It's really cool to see such an established name in the seinen manga sphere who started in Jump. This work would follow the titular Mortal Commando Guy, or Guy Honjo, a freelance journalist who, while working on covering the drug trade in South America, sees their benefactor get kidnapped by the Blythe cartel. To rescue her and possibly take revenge, he then trains under the US Special Forces, becoming a near superhuman capable of wiping out whatever the cartels can throw at him. The level of brutality, Western sensibilities, and action didn't seem to mesh with what people were expecting from Jump at the time, so it ended quickly with Sakamoto finding success in seinen magazines later on in his career. Hoshiwo Sugimono, or Inheritor of the Planet, would last 9 chapters and 1 volume by Takunobu Toda, being a full-on sci-fi series that sees humanity scattered across various planets where most are slaves to other alien races. The story would follow Baradat Knives, a bounty hunter known for massacring all the people on his home planet, looking for a way for humanity to evolve and prosper so they don't die out for good. The series would feature plenty of different alien races and would be partly episodic, seeing Knives help out people as he hops from place to place, but some core plot elements are introduced, like Jay, a mad scientist type character who has wholly rejected his humanity and has evolved with special cells which Knives is searching for. The art is pretty interesting, having unique looking characters that I feel evoke Western comics a bit. Knives also fights with something called a spiral knife, which looks super cool and seems to almost function like some kind of flying psychic knife. Even though this work was cancelled very quickly, it has a sort of cult following, and plenty of people online seem to remember it fondly for being a more mature and different manga from this period of Jump. Following this, we'd get another alien-focused sci-fi series by none other than Yoshihiro Togashi, returning after Yu Yu Hakusho, running for 16 chapters in 3 volumes, having a mostly monthly serialization within the magazine, which would stretch its run to 1997. Level E can be described as a sci-fi horror black comedy hybrid. Sci-fi and horror works weren't super common in Jump, but black comedy is a rarity since that's usually something solely targeted at older audiences. Level E isn't solely filled with that type of comedy, and certain elements are much more silly in comparison, but there is a darkness to Level E which was present in later Yu Yu Hakusho, as well as throughout his future work with Hunter x Hunter. Here it's put in on a pedestal though, which makes the work stand out a lot, especially when you pair it with the variety of weird subjects and topics the manga covers. Some are just popular concepts that Togashi as well as Japan at the time would have been interested in, like baseball, Super Sentai or Tokusatsu shows, and of course, Dragon Quest. But mix in all of this with storylines that touch on the transgender experience, cannibalism, terrorism, and of course, aliens as well. At its core, Level E follows Prince Baka El Dogra, an alien from another planet who's touched down on Earth and causes all sorts of chaos with his antics. The Earth in Level E has had visitations from countless aliens, with many living on the planet, with humans unaware of their existence. It plays around with this idea, with the story being split into several different arcs that touch on some of the aforementioned topics, usually mixing a serious and quite suspenseful or horrific narrative with zany or dark jokes to interesting effect. It's almost purposefully confrontational and weird. It feels made to push boundaries. The irregular serialization and genres it's been placed in is one thing. Togashi also worked on this solo with no assistance either, so it's solely his brainchild. But then you have its main protagonist, and love him or hate him for it, but he's a narcissistic bastard that isn't traditionally likable at all. Level E isn't meant to be your traditional Jump hit, and Togashi has said as much as in a 2017 interview during Shonen Jump's 50th anniversary. He mentions that Level E was meant to be a work that wasn't supposed to get any reader votes, and that it wasn't meant to be a big feature within the magazine. I think it's kind of amazing how something so personal and indulgent was serialized within Jump. There's a ton of things you'd never see in another series other than one Togashi himself would make. Perhaps because of the state of the magazine at the time, Level E was considered. With big losses like Dragon Ball and the prior Yu Yu Hakusho, getting Togashi back no matter what was bound to make some kind of waves for them, and I guess that was their logic. And while it wouldn't save the magazine in any way, what Level E did do was give Togashi time to work on something on his own terms, which subsequently allowed him to build strength and ideas that would come to aid Jump with a future hit a few years down the line. Level E would also get an anime adaptation all the way in 2011, several years after its conclusion, which is just as bizarre as the manga and worth watching if you're a fan of Togashi's work or want to see an alternate take on this beloved cult classic. For the purposes of this video, Level E is a fascinating and bizarre manga that fits perfectly into the crop of 1995 series that makes up Jump's dark age. Mizu no Tomadachi Kappaman will last 35 chapters in 3 volumes by Masaya Tokihiro, being his follow-up to Jungle King Tachan. Similarly to his other works, this would be a comedic manga filled with all sorts of dick and balls type jokes. I seriously think Masaya Tokihiro has the highest ratio of dicks per chapter out of any mangaka within Jump, minus a lot of the child characters like Goku, who shows his junk off a lot at the beginning of Dragon Ball. Kappaman follows Kawataro, a half-human, half-kappa hybrid who goes to look for his mother after his kappa father passes away. This injects some nice humanity into the story, which it balances well alongside the comedy and some action scenes. Kawataro is eventually joined by Mai, the daughter of a temple priest who has immaculate fashion sense and is one of the coolest characters that has ever graced the pages of Jump. Her height, long black hair, and leather jacket feel very unique for a main heroine, and how she interacts with Kawataro is a lot of fun too. Expect plenty of slapstick, pun-based humor, poop, and dick jokes, ecchi scenes, as well as tons of different yokai popping up. It's pretty interesting to read as it feels like a relic of years long past, and you really don't see this much nudity anymore in Jump. Despite its raunchiness though, Kappaman is a really sweet story that manages to interweave themes of environmentalism, and it has a heartfelt set of relationships that help Kawataro grow as a person and accept his both human and kappa sides. I love Masaya Tokihiro's art here too. He opted to let some scenes just play out for certain pages with no dialogue at all, and his art really speaks for itself. It's stylized, slightly weird, but very appealing. I especially love his expressions and the way each character's eyes just twinkle. If you'd like to read this one, you can, as it's been fully translated. Kaosu Kanburyia would last 9 chapters in 1 volume by Ton Okawara and would follow Karuma Karamoto, an antique dealer who runs a small shop who often gets into trouble. The work was episodic, with it focusing on different antiques in each installment, with there also being battle elements as the main character was proficient in martial arts, and various side characters would eventually join with different fighting styles too. Despite its very short run and simple premise, it seems to have a small cult following, with the author going on to make the King's Tailor series, which has been ongoing from 2003 and continues to be published to this day. The final new manga of the year would then be Sexy Commando Gaiden Sugoi yo Masaru-san, lasting 79 chapters and 7 volumes by Kyosuke Usuta. Sexy Commando is well regarded and loved from my understanding and can be considered a hit from the time despite its smaller length. As a comedy series, it's very varied in what it considers to be funny. Some things include random words being used or invented, singing, characters writing the word meat on each other's foreheads, and of course, referential and parody type jokes. Sexy Commando pretty much does a little bit of everything, with its namesake deriving from one of the main jokes, a faux fighting style developed or learned by the main character that involves taking your opponent off guard by doing weird things like unzipping a fly. While I didn't personally find it very funny, aside from a few jokes like the principal of the school joining the main character's club, it's very clear that people hold Sexy Commando very dearly. A part of this is because of how different and audacious the manga is, often being referred to as the origin of surreal gag manga, or something that deliberately tried to distance itself from what was considered funny at the time. On a broader level, I do think Sexy Commando captures the appeal of childish imagination. It's silly, usually depicting a bunch of kids goofing off and getting into wacky situations. So this youthful whimsy it exhibited could have been a draw for all sorts of people, young or old. It would also get an anime in 1998 after the manga had ended, which was comprised of 48 8-minute long episodes, proving its long-term popularity. Sadly, at the time of it ending, Usuta was a fairly new artist who wasn't at all ready for the strain of weekly serialization, with him saying that he ended the series because he couldn't take it anymore in a physical and mental way, as it was too demanding. Despite this though, he would continue to go on to make manga in the future and did end up making a small hit that helped Shonen Jump out throughout one of its bleaker periods. Now that we've covered all the new manga for this year, let's move on to the roster talk section where we'll quickly run through. Throughout its history, Weekly Shonen Jump has only followed a single trajectory, up. Years of aggressive serialization and paying attention to what its readers want through surveys helped spawn countless world-famous manga that helped catapult Jump. Wait a minute, I've said all of this before. It couldn't be. Killer Queen, it was you this entire time. Of course, how could we forget the end of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. The very popular Bites the Dust arc would occur this year, but so would a few arcs building up to it, leading to Part 4's conclusion. Let's Live on a Transmission Tower is another one of those extremely memorable Part 4 arcs for its concept alone, seeing Josuke, Okuyasu, and Mikitaka deal with this weirdo who lives on an intricate house on the transmission tower, which is fascinating and something only Araki could ever come up with. Mysterioso then feels like a bit more of a typical JoJo arc and one I often forget, though the gun coming from the paper is extremely cool, and I forgot how active Yuya Fungami was in this arc. It made me like him a lot more, and I wish we got more time with him. Cheap Trick then gives us a final dose of Rohan as he gets the parasitic stand of the same name attached to his back. The concept here is a lot of fun with how he has to hide his back so no one else can see it, and the way it's dealt with is absolutely genius with the callback to the Ghost Alley. All of these smaller arcs this year were a lot of fun and feel like a bit of a victory lap of quirky ideas Araki had left for Morio. The rest of the year then is devoted to Yoshikage Kira and his exploits in the Kawajiri household, where he has cocooned himself within, taking over as the patriarch of the family. There's been some short single chapters devoted to the gradual melding of him into his new role, but 1995 did open with Cats Love Yoshikage Kira, an extended arc that sees him get more familiar with his new wife and child, as well as a local cat that's taken residence within his basement. Things go awry though, and it eventually dies, but not before being rebirthed as a plant-based stand called Stray Cat, with Araki flexing his knowledge on cats and plants throughout this arc. By far the strongest part of this set of chapters is Hayato and his relationship with Kira, which is summed up particularly well in the short My Dad Is Not My Dad arc. Hayato figuring out his dad has been replaced initiates a suspenseful battle of wits between this small boy and a serial killer that is a joy to see unfold. Where previous parts would end with a set of bombastic battles that saw everybody bloody and ragged, Diamond is Unbreakable goes for a more intimate and smaller scale set piece. Bites the Dust is fantastic, an ability and arc that keep you guessing over and over. It's unfair, fits Yoshikage Kira to a T, and most importantly, it fills the end of the story with this distinct feeling of hopelessness as you see Hayato realize every single move he makes gets reset or locks someone else into a doomed fate. Kira getting struck by the arrow a second time and developing an ability that perfectly suits his ambitions of living a quiet life, something that automatically with no effort protects him, is a great example of how stands are tailored to their users, their personalities and desires. Kira also rules in 1995. There's this air of caution before Bites the Dust activates, but afterwards he's full of arrogance. He knows nothing will go wrong, all will go his way, and his tormenting of Hayato makes him an even more compelling villain than he already was. Hayato then acts as our primary lead for the closing chapters of this part, as alongside him we gradually come to understand how Bites the Dust works. We see other characters come to help him one by one like Rohan, but quickly we learn that Hayato even getting involved with them is a slippery slope ending in their deaths. The anguish he goes through as he begins to realize the hopelessness of this situation and his expressions are something I found really evocative this time while reading, and Hayato trying over and over to escape the loop to save his mother and the residents of Morio only piles on your desire as a reader to see this killer stopped once and for all. With some crafty shenanigans taking advantage of the loops, Hayato leads Josuke into a straight line to Kira, giving us this extreme moment of catharsis that there is finally hope, and the town of Morio can be saved. I do find the final battle overall a little long-winded, but I enjoy Josuke a ton here. He's at his most badass. Kira getting whittled down and cornered, eventually getting screwed over by everyone and the ambulance, is a great instance of karmic justice too. Damn It Is Unbreakable rightfully sits atop many people's favourite JoJo lists. I think the variety of arcs and stands it has is pretty much unrivaled throughout the entire series. Its cast is vibrant and a lot of fun, and its main villain is interesting and different, and how he intertwines with the narrative and the town of Morio in this Lynchian evil versus good type of way is really impactful to me. The closing duologue between Joseph and Jotaro about the town and its inhabitants with golden hearts is really lovely, and I think it solidifies some of JoJo's themes, that the just and kind people of the world will always prevail over evil, and here we see this on a smaller scale. That being said, and while I could continuously heap praise on part 4, I do feel like there's something missing, and this is pretty nebulous on my part. I feel like there should be more epilogue, more build-up, or just more Josuke. At the beginning of my retrospectives on part 4, I mentioned him being the weakest protagonist for me. He's clearly likable and I vibe with him a bit more after finishing, but I didn't see anything profound in him throughout my reread, and if anything, I wish he was explored more alongside the idea of justice and him being Mario's watchdog. I'll use this as an opportunity to bring up Mike's live action version again, as I watched it recently and I really enjoyed it, but it lets Josuke and the death of his grandpa fester a bit more. It gives him a personal reason to protect the town, and I think expanding on that relationship in the manga and maybe Josuke's connection to Mario with more introspection would have made the whole thing hit a lot harder. For me, Damn It Is Unbreakable is a few steps shy from striking gold. It's almost a complete masterpiece, but the pieces don't quite add up. Without a doubt though, it was an absolute joy to read, and it's provided me with a consistently fun manga to talk about throughout the last few history videos. For now, we say goodbye to Morio, but JoJo will return next year, where perhaps we'll finally strike that elusive gold. Now that we've covered all the new manga for this year, as well as JoJo, let's move on to the roster talk section, where we'll quickly run through what was being serialized at the beginning and end of the year to see how Jump was doing overall. 1995 began with Dragon Ball and Slam Dunk still holding down the fort. New and popular Rurouni Kenshin would also be there too, with some other high-profile manga that acted as hits, which were Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai, Rokudenashi Blues, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Captain Tsubasa World Youth, Hell Teacher Nube, and Hallelujah 2 Boy. Ninku would also be around in its second stage, and we'd also have Midori no Makibao, a solid horse racing comedy cross that was very popular, having just begun. And speaking of comedy, we still of course have Kochikame, as well as Lucky Man, Ta-chan, Bonbonzaka, and Osama Warova. We're then left with Kagemusha Tokugawa Ieyasu, which did alright, as well as Mind Assassin, which found some cult success. Following these two, we have two duds by veteran authors with Rash and Bakudan, and all in all, it's a pretty strong roster of manga that are memorable in some sort of way. I've been going on and on about this being Shonen Jump's dark age, or at least the beginning of it, so what changes happened this year? The obvious one, as I mentioned, is the conclusion of Dragon Ball, a massive blow to the magazine. Alongside this, Ninku would also end, something that, while popular, struggled to really stay in the magazine as the author found weekly serialization difficult. Bonbonzaka and Ta-chan would also end, with the latter being an especially beloved and long-running comedy hit. We would also see Mind Assassin, Rash, Bakudan, and Tokugawa Ieyasu leave as well. In their place, we would get Mizu no Tomadachi Kappaman being the next Messiah Tokahiro work post Jungle King Ta-chan, but it would never reach its heights. Sexy Commando, on the other hand, would be a new hit and would alleviate the burden of losing a few comedy manga throughout 1995, even if its run wouldn't be for very long. Majima-Kun Suttobasu would be the longest running manga from 1995, and while not exceptionally popular, it served to be a decent hit throughout this dark age, offering some battle elements and martial arts. Hisoka Returns brought some level of romance and drama to the magazine too, though it would end within the following year. We're then left with Kaosu Kanburyia and Shadow Lady, as well as Ayatsuri Sakon, though both those last two would end immediately once we enter the new year, so I'd hesitate to include them in this state of Jump at the time. The one final saving grace we would have would be Level E, serializing monthly, giving us a dose of Togashi and something wildly different from anything else. Honestly, looking at this lineup, it isn't bad at all. There's still plenty of well-loved manga here that did well, but this is the start of a decline, and I don't think anything I've really mentioned makes up for Dragon Ball leaving, even if you add it up all together. There's also the fact that most manga I mentioned joining just now wouldn't be here for very long. A few years for Majima, but everything else would pretty much have ended come the end of the following year. Dark times may be ahead, Jump circulation may be dipping, and less people were reading the magazine at the time, but that doesn't mean the next year won't be full of interesting manga, with some being classics that would go on to help define the next generation. Usually I would make a big song and dance about the ending of a decade, but this bridge between 1995 and 96 I think really marks a big turning point in the magazine, as we see a lot of old mangaka leave and new ones appearing on the scene who would go on to become legends. And that pretty much covers Shonen Jump in the year 1995. We're halfway through the 90s now, and I know there's a lot of big manga that are well loved and nostalgic for people, which we'll cover soon. Let me know which ones you're excited for in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it, sharing it around, or subscribing so you don't miss out on the next one. I've been covering Jump's history for a few years now, all the way from its beginning, and while the first few videos are a bit rough, they still could be pretty interesting. I also make videos on more modern Shonen Jump manga, like in my Axe-File series, where I take a look at the cancelled manga within the magazine. If you watched this and really enjoyed, please also consider joining the Patreon. It helps me get these out on a regular pace, and I super appreciate the support. You'll also get access to a few extra things if you join, like a library of small bonus videos, polls for videos, and at the $3 tier, a personal little doodle to represent you in the video credits, just like the following cool people. Thank you: Trinity, Jade, Kaizoku Gairu, Soraquil Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fako, Yellowtail, Lay Slugget, Chris P. Bacon, Shohenshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yuzakura Psycho, Whizzle, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vina Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, 41IZ, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Poke Emblem, James Miller, Jopo Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, New Humanoid, Mark Nielsen, Electro Pirate, and also Hilltop, Vaco Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Color, Jaime, Strawberry Pressione, Vaz, Palette, Ruiner, Juiz, TG Talks Manga, Kuromi Nox, Eric Gorski, Miss the Shira, Gay Shark, Grizz Exploder, and Jay Vasso at the $1 tier. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.